This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. We're broadcasting on over 700 stations on Pacifica and NPR, low-power FM college and community radio stations, on public access TV and PBS TV stations, and both TV satellite networks, on Dish Network, channel 9415 Free Speech TV, on 9410 Link TV, on DirecTV, channel 375, and we're video and audio podcasting at democracynow.org. Our headlines are also available in Spanish for any radio station to take, as over 200 are, and the headlines are translated in Spanish on our website in transcript form. I'm Amy Goodman. Our guest for the hour is Jane Mayer. She is author of the book, The Dark Side, the inside story of how the war on terror turned into a war on American ideals. Talk about the title, The Dark Side.
Well, as we all know, September 11th was a sea change. Everybody says everything changed after that, and it did. But I think one of the most important changes that the country hasn't really thought about is America became a country that, for the first time in its history, endorsed what is torture in all but name. And since then, it changed, I think, from a war for the country's security, the war on terror, to a battle for the country's soul. And we have to really think about whether or not this is what kind of country we want to be.
You were talking about Abu Zubaydah. Let's talk about the psychologists involved in his interrogation.
Well, they were the ones who showed up there, right by Abu Zubaydah's side.
Where?
Well, it's in an undisclosed location where Abu Zubaydah was being held by the CIA. Suddenly, a psychologist showed up, and the FBI's reaction was, who is this person? His name is James Mitchell. He is a contractor to the CIA, a contract interrogator or advisor to the interrogation program. And he started talking about how there were these psychological theories that would help break down the detainees. And the theories he talked about were experiments with dogs, in which dogs were put in cages and electrocuted, and in a random way that completely broke their will to resist. It's a theory called learned helplessness, and it was springs from experiments done in the 1970s by a very famous psychologist in America named Martin Seligman, who actually went to lecture at the a bunch of people who were involved with the CIA's program, including this psychologist, James Mitchell. So James Mitchell and a partner, Bruce Jessen, became advisors to the CIA's interrogation program. I think to step back, what you need to know is that the CIA had no experience, really, in interrogating prisoners. They'd never really held prisoners before. And so they really had no idea how to go about getting information out of people. So they turned to an incredibly strange place, which is a secret program inside the military that had studied torture. And it had studied torture in order to teach our own soldiers how to survive it if they were ever taken captive by some kind of completely immoral regime. Because they understood torture, the CIA turned to them and said, well, so how do you do it? And basically, they reverse engineered this program in the most ironic way, and what became a program that was defensive became, instead of, it was like a blueprint for torture. It was a rule book. And I actually got into this story because in researching this subject, I started with the question wondering, why is it that all around the world we're seeing the same really strange kind of mistreatment of prisoners? Is this the work just of freelancing American soldiers? Why do they all have hoods? Why are they shackled in the same stressed positions? Why are they being bombarded with these sounds so that their eardrums are, splitting? And why are they being kept up day after day and, exposed to heat and cold and all these things that were particularly odd seeming, and they were cropping up in Iraq, they were cropping up in Guantanamo, and in Afghanistan. And so I just went into it without knowing any of the answers and just asking, is there a rule book to this thing? Is there a curriculum? And in fact, it turned out there was a curriculum, and the curriculum is from this secret program in the military. It's known as the SEER program, and the CIA consulted with the SEER program to figure out how to get its methods, and these psychologists that you're talking about were the ones who basically became the experts in it.
What was, for example, James Mitchell's background?
he was an instructor. He's a psychologist who oversaw this training program. He had never been an interrogator. He had no background in Islamic fundamentalism. I mean, one of the FBI officers, as they were struggling over what to do with Abu Zubaydah, said, you know, do you know anything about Islamic radicals? Do you speak Arabic? If you got any background in this area? And he didn't, but he felt that because, and I've actually talked to Mitchell. He's a great believer in science is science, as he says, and so he used what he thought was good science, which were experiments that had been done on dogs, to apply them to ways to break down human detainees.
All right, let's go to the
Can I just wait? Amy, I got to just say one thing so we don't wander into some kind of legal problem. A lawyer for Mitchell says that these were not his theories at all and that he never meant to apply them this way. That is absolutely not what colleagues of his have said, and I cite them by name in the book.
Who?
Okay. Steve Kleinman, who is a colonel in the Army, and he worked at the SEER program, and he said that James Mitchell would speak continually about using this learned helplessness model.
Let's go to this learned helplessness model. Talk about the former president of the American Psychological Association, Martin Seligman.
Okay, again, and here we have to be careful, but Martin Seligman is one of the most eminent psychologists in America. He teaches at Penn. And,
University of Pennsylvania.
University of Pennsylvania, sorry. And he was the former head of the American Psychological Association, the organization of professional psychologists. And so, very, very prominent man. He was called in shortly after Abu Zubaydah was captured and handed over to the CIA. He was called in to give a lecture, mysterious still exactly what kind of lecture it was, but he spoke for 3 hours. I talked to him about it by email. I talked to who the lecture was to? The lecture was to CIA officers, including these psychologists. Both Bruce Jessen and James Mitchell were in the audience. And it took place at the SEER School in San Diego, which is where, again, this unusual program existed.
Survival,
evasion, resistance, escape. It's a program that has sort of kept, that has studied torture in order, supposedly, to inoculate the U.S. soldiers against it. But after 9/11, the same techniques started cropping up around the world, being used by U.S. soldiers.
You talked to Martin Seligman about this.
Yes, I did, and by email, and he acknowledged he gave a lecture for 3 hours in April at the SEER School. He has added to that recently, mentioning that these two psychologists were in the audience. He has said he never assisted torture. He is against torture. That his experiments were meant to safeguard U.S. soldiers. It may be that he was just innocently misinterpreted by the CIA. It's really hard to tell exactly what happened, but what we do know is that his theories began to be cited by these psychologists who then oversaw the CIA program and started putting Abu Zubaydah, for instance, in a dog cage, and also put a dog collar on another detainee and thrust him into the wall with it head first. And these were just the beginning of some of the things these people went through.
We invited Dr. Martin Seligman to join us on the program.